Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast number 378. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the afternoon of Monday, October the 7th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County. Today's essay, Germany or Florida? Now, once upon a time, I kind of copied the title. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in a galaxy not so far away, a couple of guys had a show called Loveline. Adam Carolla and Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, that Jimmy Kimmel. Long before late night talk television, he did a show with Adam Carolla called Loveline, and they had a feature on there called Germany or Florida. And basically, the premise of the skit was Germany is the worldwide capital of kook town. Okay, if something's weird, bizarre, or just strange, it probably came from Germany. Okay, because Germans tend to be unique individuals. We'll just say that. However, if it's in the United States, that weirdness tends to come from Florida. So what the guys would do is they would name a story of some guy or gal doing something totally bizarre. And the audience had to guess, did this take place in Germany or Florida? So that's the essay of today's podcast. And actually, we're not even going to talk about Germany, only Florida. And Florida, to me, I love Florida. I will be there later this month on holiday with the trophy wife. Hurricanes, if the hurricanes don't destroy it. But I love Florida. I love the Panhandle, the Destin, Pensacola area, most beautiful beaches in the world. And I love Miami. So both ends of the state, they're nothing alike, but they're both Florida. The weather's just outstanding, but there's some things going on in Florida that aren't quite so cool. And we're going to talk about one of the things that Florida does that's unbelievably cool. And we're also going to talk about some things that people in Florida do that is just very uncool. Okay. So again, topic of today's podcast, Germany or Florida. We're actually going to stick with Florida and talk about how they do one thing really well and one thing not so much, okay? Before we get to that that part of the podcast, a couple of things going on. I wanted to just mention a couple of things. We had a strike that lasted, was it a week maybe? The East Coast dock workers, the longshoremen, went on strike and they shut down every port, virtually every port from Maine to Texas. Okay. The strike was settled fairly quickly. They have like I want to say a 10-year contract, something like that, long contract. So we're not going to worry about it for a long, long time. But something strange happened. And I think it has to do with ignorance, if nothing else. And when I say ignorance, I mean, people don't look at things logically quite often. Okay. When we had this strike by the longshoremen, that was going to shut down a lot of stuff coming into this country, primarily coming in from the East. So primarily that would be stuff coming in from Europe, lesser extent Africa, but mainly Europe and Africa, because that's what comes in from that part of the country, and from a lesser extent from South America, because it comes north. Okay. One of the things that people hoarded then, because they were afraid that we're going to run out, is toilet paper. And I don't know why we have an obsession with hoarding toilet paper in this country. Dear listeners, I don't want to say zero, but if not zero, almost 0% of our toilet paper comes from Europe, Africa, or South America. Toilet paper is made in this country. And probably always will, okay? The reason being is it doesn't cost that much, and it takes up a lot of cargo space, okay? So you want to ship toilet paper or you want to manufacture toilet paper as close to its source as possible, because much of the cost is just shipping the stuff. I mean, you can only fit so much on a truck, right? And they're not going to ship it all the way across the country. I know people freaked out during COVID because there was a toilet paper shortage in the United States. A lot of it was because, actually in the world, and a lot of it was because of hoarding. A lot of it was because they couldn't staff the plants. And toilet paper plants run 24/7, okay? And you just can't say, well, just put in new machines, because a toilet paper machine is about the size of a football field, okay? There's a very limited amount of people who make these things. And if you were to decide to buy a toilet paper manufacturing machine right now, it would take about 3 years before you would get it, okay? So think about this. If you're already running capacity 24/7, and you have to shut down for a few days because you don't have people to staff it because of COVID for whatever reason, you really can't make up the slack, because if you're already running 24/7, you can't run 25/8, if you know what I'm saying, okay? So that's why we had a toilet paper problem during COVID. Toilet paper machines never went down. We don't import our toilet paper, but for some reason, people thought it was necessary to hoard the toilet paper. Well, if you were a toilet paper hoarder, or if you're losing sleep over this, if you're part of the uneducated populace, you can rest easy now, because the strike is over, and you're going to have enough toilet paper. Okay, I don't understand the way people think sometimes, but you know what? That's what makes the world go around. Sometimes there's a lot of people out there who don't understand why I think the way I do. So there's always that. The other thing I wanted to get into and just touch on a moment before we get into the essay is how many times have you heard shop local, support your local businesses, don't shop online or shop at the big box stores, because that's just corporate America. Shop from the little guy, the local guy, the guy whose kids you go to school with, their parents send their kids to the same school as you do, et cetera, et cetera. I will tell you that I do that when I can. And when I say when I can, I mean that when it suits me, when there's a reason to. You've heard me say on this show that if I'm going to buy a pack of batteries, and if Walmart sells it for $5 and the local guy sells it for $7, I'm not going to buy it from the local guy, okay? Why? There's no value added. But if he's going to explain to me why this battery works better, or help me put it into the appliance that I've bought, okay, there's value added. So you pay the extra money, okay? As all of you know, I've been in the process of restoring this old Jaguar, this 1951 Jaguar Mark 7. And the car turns over now, so I'm crossing my fingers thinking the electrics are right. Next thing to do are the fuel lines, okay? So I needed to buy fuel lines. And sure, I could buy it online, but you got to pay shipping, and this is it's kind of heavy. It'd take a long time to get there. I'm kind of in a hurry. So I went to the local auto parts store, and basically I went to the Napa store, because once upon a time, before AutoZone, before O'Reilly's, before all those, you had Napa. And Napa was the store that's where you went, because these guys knew what they were doing. They just weren't clerks behind a desk. They were mechanics working the weekends, mechanics who got too old to work on cars, guys who owned a rebuild it shop in the back. They knew what they were doing, okay? So I needed a little bit of advice, didn't mind paying extra money, so I went to the Napa store. Well, when I called the Napa store at first, there was an option for me to order this stuff online, and then you pick it up at the Napa store. And that's what the guy told me to do. Yeah, just order it online, then come by here and pick it up. Okay. The website didn't work. So I called the guy back. He said, well, just do it online. I told you. I tried to do it online. It doesn't give me an option. And the problem was the stuff was priced per foot, and it came in a 50-foot reel. But if you put in quantity of one, it just charged you for 1 foot, which is not what I needed. And if you tried to put in 50, it said, hey, you can't put in 50. You got to put in something less than that. Well, I didn't know how it worked. So I called the guy back, and he kind of sighed and said, well, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. You can come by and pick it up. So I did it, went by the next day, picked it up. And I asked him, I said, did you have the same problem with the website that I did? He said, yes, I did. He said, it wouldn't work for me either, but I can get around it. You couldn't, I could. And here it is. It'll be so much. I said, okay, thank you. I need some more stuff. So I asked him a question or two, and he kind of answered the question and he kind of didn't. But I got a little bit of information out of the guy, bought some stuff, went back to the shop. As I was working on it, I realized, you know what? I need some more stuff. So the next day, I went back to the Napa store again. And the guy saw me. The guy remembered me. The guy looked at me. And I said, hey, you helped me out the other day, so I'm back here again. And I didn't get a, okay, great. How did it work out? Or, okay, well, what can we help you with this time? He said, okay. And it was it. Explained my problem to him. And he said, I don't know if I have this. I don't know if I have that. I don't know if that'll work. I'm not sure about this. I just have to order it, and then it would come in, and I'm not sure if that's what you want. And finally, he just told me, he said, you know, why don't you just buy this stuff online? And I thought to myself, I'm trying to go to the local guy, knowing I'm going to pay more, but understanding I'm going to pay more because I'm getting some advice as well. And advice is not free. If somebody is smarter than me, it's because they've done something that I haven't done. Okay. And that took their time. That took effort. And I have no problem paying for that expertise. And I was willing to do that. And trust me, the Napa store charged me a whole lot more than if I had just bought it online. But again, I'm paying for the expertise. I'm paying for the advice. That's the advantage of shopping local. And when the guy told me for the second time, look, why don't you just go buy this stuff online? I said, well, I kind of like to get it now. He's clicking on his computer. And I'm thinking, okay, well, he's looking a little bit further. Then he finally says, okay, I found it. I said, oh, okay, great. When can I have it? He said, no, I found it online. Go to this website. Go to this guy and order it. Okay, thanks for the advice. And I left. I went to Lowe's, found what I needed, and walked out the door. Okay. The guy didn't want to help me. And this was not some young kid. Okay. I know a lot of people of my age like to slam these young kids nowadays. This guy was close to my age. He was at least 50, maybe closer to 60. So this was not some young kid with 18 body piercings. Okay. And green hair. This was a guy that looked like he'd been around a little bit, and he had no inkling to help me at all. In fact, he gave me a website as to where to order it so I wouldn't bother him anymore. If the people at the Napa Auto Store in O'Fallon, Missouri are listening to this, don't worry, I won't be bothering you again. Ever. Had another instance, which was kind of on the flip side. And the trophy wife went to a store to buy some makeup, okay? And she found the makeup, but it was behind a case that's all locked up. A lot of this stuff that costs extra, they do that because of shoplifters. So you press a button, the attendant comes up. So the attendant says, what can I help you with? Well, I need this makeup product here. And so, okay, she opened it up, or tried to open up with the key. She says, I can't open this. Can you open it for me? And the reason she couldn't open it is because she had these custom fingernails that were about 2 inches long. And had she really tried to open the door with a key, translation, do her job, she might have broke a nail. So she just gave it to my wife and said, could you open this, please? She did. I'll take that. She gave it to her. Okay, well, thank you. She says, oh, no, you can't take this. I'll bring it up front, and then you can pick it up on the way out to check it out. And my wife says, well, you just gave it to me. Why can't I just, well, no, that's the rule. I have to bring it up front, then you have to go pick it up. She said, well, what is up front? Is it up front at a cash register, up front at customer service, up front at where is up front? And the gal looked at my wife and shrugged her shoulders. Says, I don't know. So, well, how am I supposed to pick this up if I don't know where you're going to take it? And she shrugged her shoulders again. Okay, my wife said, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. I'll buy this someplace else. Now, this was an expensive makeup item, okay? It wasn't cheap. In fact, it was so expensive they had it under lock and key, which would tell you this is not some $1.95 eyeliner, right? But basically another case where the person whose job it was to sell you something basically said, yeah, this is kind of hard, so why don't you just go someplace else? Sometimes shopping online is the way you need to do this stuff, folks. I hate to admit it, but people don't argue with you online. I don't know. We live in interesting times. We live in an interesting world, and things are done differently than they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago. And 5, 10, 15 years from now, things will be done differently once again. But when you hear the mantra, shop local, and then local treats you like this, sorry, I'm all out. All right. So I guess I'm done with that. So let's go ahead and go into the essay today. Germany or Florida? And we're going to concentrate on Florida. And as mentioned before, I love Florida. I'll be there later this month. That'll be the Panhandle this month. Hopefully early next year, we'll be back down in Miami because, again, Florida is just a wonderful place. The Panhandle is beautiful beaches, family atmosphere down near Miami, nice beaches, not nearly as beautiful as the Panhandle, but it's almost, there's such a Latin vibe in Miami that it's almost like you're traveling internationally, except for you're still in the States. They still take the money. Most of the people speak English, not all, but it's kind of like being international because when you travel internationally, a lot of folks speak English, but not all. And my Spanish is decent. I can find directions, ask for food, have simple conversations. So that's not a barrier for me. So I love Florida. It's fantastic. And they do many things right. And that's the first thing we'll talk about. What does Florida do right? One of the biggest things they do right is one of the same things that Missouri does right. And that is generate electricity. Now, we talked about the differences in generating electricity state to state to state. And really, the differences shouldn't be that much. In fact, once upon a time, it wasn't. But now the haves and have-nots, electricity is a whole lot different, priced a whole lot differently, depending on where you live. In fact, electricity rates in the United States have diverged sharply recently. In 2004, residential electricity in the 5 most expensive states was only twice as much as expensive as the 5 most affordable states. So twice as much in 2024 or 2004. That's 20 years ago. Most expensive state, probably California, was twice as expensive as the least state. Now it's 160% more expensive. So more than 1.5 times more expensive. A huge gap. Now, what's the difference? Simple. The policies of those states. Now, 8 of the 10 most costly states, they have enacted renewable portfolio standards, net zero carbon emission mandates, and regional cap and trade schemes. And all 8 are controlled by Democrats. Now, I'm not slamming Democrats here. I'm just explaining the difference between what's important to Democrats and important to Republicans. Because as I go into this is my opinion. But it may be important to you that, well, look, yeah, the Democrats are being ecologically responsible and the Republicans are not. And there's a case to be made for that. But we're just talking about how much it costs to turn on the lights. The 8 most expensive, or 8, they're controlled by Democrats. New York, they get special honors. They do things possibly the worst. In fact, New York State has refused to develop the prestigious shale gas resources that have enriched Pennsylvania. New York State has tons of shale exports or resources, but they will not allow them to dig for it. Pennsylvania does, okay? And New York has actually blocked construction of new natural gas pipelines even, depriving New Yorkers and all New Englanders, because it has to go through New York, of affordable energy. Now, among the most populous states, Florida stands out as an island of sanity in a sea of government madness. Now, they've been under Republican governance since 1999, so 25 years. And those Republican governors have kind of let them do their thing. In fact, the Sunshine State, Florida, took advantage of the shale boom. They prioritized natural gas over renewable energy, and that's kept electricity prices low. In fact, Florida relies on natural gas for 75% of its electricity. 75%, that's a lot. That's more than any other large state. Now, what makes that remarkable is because of the 5 largest states, other than 4, that's California, New York, Pennsylvania, and Texas, they all have significant natural gas reserves. But they're still the most expensive. Florida has 0 natural gas reserves. Yet compared with Florida, residential electricity is 27% more expensive in Pennsylvania. It's 60% more expensive in New York. It's 137% more expensive in California. And they have no natural gas. They just pipe it in, okay? Now, even pro-energy, GOP-controlled Texas has more expensive electricity than Florida. Now, a lot of that is because they have a large renewable energy sector, because they have a lot of wind, they have a lot of sun, so they can do the renewable energy sector. And that makes its grid costly and difficult to operate, okay? Now, because it has avoided the climate policies of other states, Florida is better positioned to weather the historic energy scarcity crisis now bearing down on America's electric grid. Now, just as electricity demand is soaring across the country, driven by electric vehicles and artificial intelligence data centers, a train wreck of federal policy failures is constraining the grid's ability to meet new demand. Grid operators are already sounding the alarm. Now, you've all heard this. We need to get greener, and we don't need to be using internal combustion engines. We need to be using electric cars. Now, there's if you're talking about the ecology, that's a viable statement if the energy gets greener, okay? So if we go to the majority of solar, wind, other renewables, electricity becomes very clean, and it is better for the environment, okay? And while the number of electric cars that are around is the rate of increase, I'll say this, the rate of increase of electric cars on the road, percentage-wise, has gotten less and less, or the rise is not as steep, I'll say that. But every year, every month, the percentage of electric cars versus ICE cars on the road, it increases. So electric cars are here to stay. People are buying them, and they use energy. You've all heard about artificial intelligence and how it's going to replace this, that, and this. Friends, artificial intelligence sucks a lot of electricity. So there's already a lot of places in the country, particularly those that are going on renewable sources like solar and wind, and they're already at their peak, and they're trying to shut down more coal and more natural gas. And nuclear is not really. They built one nuclear plant recently in Georgia, but that's it. And while solar and wind are fine, they're good. If the sun doesn't come out and the wind doesn't blow, friends, you're not getting any electricity. It's not happening. And as the electricity grid demands more electricity, if you shut off coal and gas, natural gas, you can't get there from here, okay? Now, one persistent problem is the suffocating red tape that the federal government puts out. Now, to placate environmentalists, the Biden-Harris administration rolled back Trump-era reforms to the federal permitting process, and even those that benefited from renewable energy are having troubles. The now Inflation Reduction Act subsidies are flooding the market with solar, so nuclear, coal, and gas plants needed for baseload energy generation, they can't recoup their costs because all this money's going towards wind and solar, okay? Now, making a bad situation worse, Ms. Harris says that if elected, she'll implement new EPA rules regarding power plants to adopt astronomically expensive carbon capture technologies that are actually unproven. And the EPA expects this new rule will just force most coal power plants to close because they'll say, look, if you want to continue to operate, you got to do this. And by doing this, it makes the plant not profitable, so they'll shut it down. Now, investment in new large natural gas plants is dried up too because the EPA has promised to follow up next year with another rule that could shut down many of the existing natural gas plants. Now, between retiring coal plants responsible for 15% of the United States energy generation and soaring demand projections of at least 15%, our country is facing an electrical capacity shortfall of perhaps 30% by 2032. The regulatory train wreck will severely constrain the grid's capacity to make up the shortfall. You can't get there from here. Now, a lot of people think that solar power is coming to the rescue. Not so much. Now, only a fraction of the proposed solar and wind plants can be built in time to avert a scarcity crisis, let alone achieve zero carbon emission goals by 2035. And their output will be far short of the capacity needed because they don't generate power continuously. Solar powers generate no power at nighttime, limited power when it's cloudy, okay? Some point to states with high renewable penetration and low energy prices as proof that renewable sources are reliable. And that's true, but they're kind of geographical anomalies. Washington State, for instance, they generate a lot of cheap energy, mainly because they have lots of hydropower. The Columbia River, okay? The upper Midwest, the wind always blows up there, okay? And they got a lot of land where they can throw the windmills up, okay? But those are anomalies, okay? You can't put a hydro plant in Southern California. You can't put a wind plant in New England. They tried to put wind plants in New England, and everyone said, nope, they're too ugly, don't take them down. In fact, they said, well, let's put them offshore because there's plenty of room offshore. And they were going to put a whole bunch of them in near Hyannisport. Who lives in Hyannisport? That's right, the Kennedys. The Kennedy says, we're not looking at that. Don't even think about putting them out there. And that was Ted Kennedy. That was a long time ago, friends. And they said, don't even think about it. They're ugly. We don't want to look at them. It was your ultimate NIMBY, not in my backyard type deal, okay? So saying that wind and solar are going to solve the problem, wind and solar are certainly going to contribute to the solution. But you can't say wind and solar are going to replace natural gas and coal. Now, let's get back to Florida. Florida's experience shows that the value of investing in resilient rather than green technology is paying benefits. Now, they just had a hurricane go through there, Hurricane Helene. In less than a week, Florida restored electricity to 99% of those who lost power in Hurricane Helene. And it's now helping neighboring states with disaster recovery. So they've got their mask on. They can now help other people. Now, while Florida may avoid blackouts and rationing that could plague other states, it isn't immune to rising prices or foolish policies. Now, NextEra, who owns Florida Power and Light, they have announced plans to cut by 52% the number of the utility's carbon emissions by 2030 and by 83% by 2040. Here we go again. We do something right, and now they want to do something wrong. Now, let's get back to the whole Democrat-Republican thing for just a minute before you, dear listeners, think that, okay, the election's coming up and here Strong is going GOP on me. That's not the case at all. I've always said that we need to continue to do what we can to help the ecology of the country, of the world, because nobody wants to breathe dirty air. Nobody wants to drink dirty water. Nobody wants to walk in trash. Nobody wants to smell sewage. Nobody does. Zero people. But if you make energy so expensive that the average person can't turn on their air conditioner, okay, then you've not helped anybody. You've helped nobody. How about if we get there in baby steps? And I've said this before, when they had I don't know if it was in Japan or France or one of the big green global warming summits they had, the United States, Trump pulled out. And everybody criticized him. And actually, I kind of criticized him too, because I thought it was a stupid thing to do to pull out. What he should have done is just said, yeah, we'll do what we can and then do what we want. And even though the United States is the only major country that doesn't participate in this, of all the countries that reduce their carbon footprint the most, we're by far the biggest. We're doing more than anybody, okay? We continue to do more to reduce our carbon footprint and need to continue to do that. And one of the big reasons is because when we retire a coal plant, we put in 2 natural gas plants. And that's just a figure I threw out there. Natural gas plants do not pollute that much, hardly any, okay? When a hurricane goes through a place with a bunch of windmills and knocks all the windmills down, it will take decades and hundreds of millions of dollars to replace those windmills. So you can't put windmills where the hurricanes come. Kind of the same thing with solar, okay? I mean, solar panels break, and then you got to replace them, okay? Now, a coal or gas-fired power plant can withstand hurricanes. Now, what happens is the lines get knocked down. Those that aren't underground. Okay, they put them back up. You're done. Less than a week. I mean, you saw what Hurricane Helene did to the country. In less than a week, they got 99% of all those who lost power in Florida. They got them back up and going. Less than a week. Florida has done something very prudent, very good here. And if next year wants to do, who owns Florida Power and Light, if they want to go all goofy like the rest of them, then Florida will be no better off than anybody else. Florida number 2, and this isn't really something that Florida is doing wrong, but it's just something that people do, and people are funny. People are just funny. And there's an old joke, I've told this before, with climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it, the people who have houses that are right on the coast, right on the beach, okay? They're all up in arms saying, oh my gosh, my beachfront property is going to be underwater. Somebody has to do something. And you know the people who don't care, in fact, are kind of glad we're having global warming, it's the people who live behind them, because once that house goes underwater, they now have the beachfront property, okay? It's another NIMBY thing. Not in my backyard. I can go ahead and go on up because I'm right behind him and now my property's worth more. Houses on the beach were really never meant to be. Houses in these canyons in California where the wildfires go through were never meant to be. The Native Americans who lived in those areas never lived in the canyons. They never lived on the beach. Why not? They could live anywhere they wanted. Why didn't they build houses on the beach? Because they knew they had hurricanes, okay? They knew they had hurricanes. In the 1980s, my parents came real close to buying a house in Navarre. They were building this new project on Navarre, which is right near Destin, right on the beach. Big community, big development. My folks were going to buy it. And then they didn't. And then Dad said in all his wisdom, see there, we were smart. We didn't buy it because 20 years later, a hurricane came through and washed everything into the ocean. But they just rebuilt it again. Now, Florida has been beautiful. People have loved to live on the beach in Florida for many years. How come in 1980 nobody had built any houses on these beaches? Why didn't somebody build earlier? Because of the hurricanes. Okay. Now, we've got another hurricane coming through. I can't even think of the name of it. Is it Milton? I think it's Hurricane Milton, something like that. That's supposed to come through later this week. Right smack dab, maybe the almost similar path that Helene took. And this is going to be terrible. But dear listeners, hurricanes in Florida are nothing new. Fires in California are nothing new. Now, you may say, yeah, they've gotten worse because of climate change, and that might be true, but we've always had this stuff. I live in arguably the most boring state in the union, Missouri, okay? Flyover country. I've had a lot of people on either coast laugh, you live in the state of misery. Okay, not Missouri, but misery, just a play on the words. And I laugh along with them. Yeah, well, that's kind of where I live. I get it. It's not nearly as exciting as where you folks live. But the electricity is less than 10 cents a kilowatt hour, not 70 cents a kilowatt hour. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have wildfires. We have tornadoes. That's true. We do have tornadoes. In fact, in the community that I live in, we've been here 34 years, I think. 34, 35 years, something like that. And we've had 2 tornadoes that have come through our community, okay? And I think a total of 4 houses have been badly damaged in 30 years. A hurricane wipes out the whole city. A tornado wipes out a few houses. And here's the other thing about a hurricane or wildfire. People have always said, well, that's what insurance is for, okay? Dear listeners, the insurance companies have so much debt, it's not even funny. In fact, some insurance companies, places in Florida, the insurance company is the state. And not only do they have no reserves, but they're in the red in reserves, hundreds of millions of dollars. And here comes another hurricane. A friend of mine whose father, he has a place in Florida, a small manufactured home. About every 5 years, hurricane comes through there and destroys it. He buys another one. And I asked him, so why does he not have insurance? They laughed, said they won't insure that house because every 5 years or so a hurricane comes through and destroys it. If you're going to live down there, every 5 years you got to buy a new one. And that's just the way it is, okay? A guy named Kellen Driscoll moved to Florida in 2019. Bought a house, was built in 1960. No flood history, okay? Next year, a hurricane hit, flooded his house. They said, you know what? First time since 1960, it was a fluke. That was in 2000. It flooded again in 2001 and 2002 and 2003. And now with Helene, 2004. He can't sell the house. They've flooded 4 times in 4 years, he says. I've had to get new televisions, new furniture, new appliances. Everything just goes to the curb. Trying to sell the house. It's in a good neighborhood, but dealing with the floods is horrible. I'm done. But nobody wants to buy his house. Now, I feel bad for these folks because the thing about Florida, you're by the beach. It's beautiful. It doesn't snow. I mean, right now, we got sunny and 72 degrees. Right now, what's the temperature here right now? As of 1:50 p.m. Central Daylight Time, it's 73 degrees with low humidity. Simply beautiful. One of the 20 pick days that we get a year here in East Central Missouri, okay? But we don't have hurricanes. We don't have wildfires. Our insurance is reasonable because, sure, we get hailstorms. We do, okay? Park your car in your garage. Get a new roof every 10 years, 15 years. Actually, it's been almost 25 years since we've had a new roof put on. I've never bought a new roof because hail always destroys it. I get a new roof, okay? I've done that 3 times now, gotten 3 roofs, 2 roofs. I've gotten two roofs from insurance companies in the past, how long have I been a homeowner? Do the quick math, 45 years, 46 years. I've been a homeowner for 46 years, 45 years. Insurance is put on 2 roofs, okay? So we're talking about thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And houses anymore, I mean, once upon a time, I bought this house where I am here for $90,000 35 years ago. It's worth 4 or 5 times that now, which means if it's worth 4 or 5 times that, your insurance is going to be close to 4 or 5 times that amount too, right? Right? Think about it. When I had my first roof put on, insurance company wrote me a check to put a roof on my house. $1,100 for everything. That's to have the guy strip off 2 old roofs, put on a new one, done. $1,100. Not anymore. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, okay? But things just cost more. Insurance costs more. Houses were worth more, okay? There's an advantage to living in beauty and paradise. Those canyons in California are so beautiful. They're so beautiful to drive through. And once or twice in a generation, wildfire comes through there. The Native Americans, again, they never lived in the canyons. When those winds whip through there at 80 miles an hour, you can't even run away from it. I've heard people who say, okay, well, I'll just turn on the garden hose and I'll fight it. No, you won't. You'll fry. You'll turn into a marshmallow. People have never lived in those canyons because those canyons are uninhabitable because of the wildfires. You can't live on the coast quite often because hurricanes come. Now, if you're one of the captains of industry and you could afford to build something, a castle made of stone, sure, you can live there. And the average Joe thinks, I'll just save my money and I'll put up a little bitty old frame house and it'll be fine. Yeah, the wind blows it away and now you don't know what to do. And it all comes back to the first thing we were talking about. Toilet paper. Why do people hoard toilet paper when they have a longshoreman strike on the East Coast, when none of our toilet paper comes into the United States from the East Coast? A lot of times people make those decisions because they don't think, they don't research, they don't weigh the pros and cons. And this whole thing with living in Florida with the hurricanes is the same thing. Okay? It's the same thing. If you live there, there's a price. And when the chickens come home to roost and it's time to pay the bill, don't get on television and cry and saying, I can't afford this, I need help. Because you made that choice. You rolled the dice and it came up snake eyes. Feel bad for you. But dear listeners, before you make decisions like that, whether it's hoarding toilet paper or buying a house in a hurricane area or a California canyon that burns, think to yourself, what are the consequences? And that's kind of how life works, doesn't it? Well, that's it. We're done. JamesStrongShow@hotmail.com. That's the email address. Send me your email. I'd love to listen. I'd love to get the emails. I get them all the time. I answer all the time, and I appreciate it all the time. That's it. We're done. Until next time, this is James Strong saying adios.